The European Union is exploring the possibility of introducing a bloc-wide ban on social media use for children under the age of 16. It's the latest sign of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's personal commitment to addressing the impact of social media on young people. She has repeatedly voiced concerns about the risks social media poses to children and teenagers, arguing that stronger EU-level measures may be needed. Well, Australia was the first country to introduce a nationwide ban on social media accounts for children under 16. That was in December of last year. It has recently been followed by Indonesia in March and Malaysia in June. In Europe, many countries are considering or proposing similar restrictions, among them Norway, the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, and Spain. Other European countries are pursuing even lower age limits like France, Portugal, Denmark, and Austria. We'll get the details from Brussels about the EU's plan for a social media ban in a few minutes. But first, let's cross over to Australia and find out how the world's first social media ban is coming along. I'm joined now by journalist Andre Leslie in Tasmania. Andre, welcome back to DW. Now, first of all, tell us how Australia's social media ban works.
Well, Nicole, it's good to be back, first of all. Thanks for getting me on to talk this through. Well, it's 7 months in. It's a pretty simple rule, really. If you are under 16, you're not able to use social media. And that is a ban that social media companies are forced to implement here in Australia. If you're on an Australian VPN, or you aren't able to go straight in to social media if you're under that 16 years of age. And I'm talking things like the classics, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and that sort of thing, but also some things that you may not think of immediately like YouTube or Reddit. They are also covered by this ban that's meant to keep all those who are 15 and under out.
How popular was the idea with kids and adults before it came into effect 7 months ago?
How popular was it? Well, I don't think the kids really loved it. There was a lot of positivity from the adult population. I mean, it was driven by Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, his government. He talked about very regularly towards the end of last year that we're seeing kids spending too long on social media. But they also did a survey back at the time, shortly after this came in on December 10, 7 months ago, and it found that something like 4 out of 5 Australian adults didn't want kids to use social media if they were under 16. So they broadly supported it, 4 out of 5. What was noticeable was the younger the adult, the less likely they were to support it. They were more like sort of 70%. And then when you got to an older Australian, they really didn't want kids down under 16 using big tech social media, and that sort of disapproval rate was something like 90% on social media usage. So it really is an age thing. It's pretty obvious to see.
Yeah. Let's look at how effective it's been then. A recent study concluded that 4 in 5 under 16s in Australia continue to use social media despite the ban. That can hardly be called a success story, can it?
No, I think a lot of kids well, you know, let's not sell them short. They're enterprising young people growing up in a tech-savvy world, and they're tech-savvy themselves. So they're getting round the ban, pretty obviously. That is a University of Newcastle study. It's a city on the east coast of Australia that has run a study of around 400 people, but 400 young people, 12 to 17-year-old. And something like over 50% of those kids that are using are actually doing it with their own accounts. So clearly the verification techniques that social media is using in Australia is not foolproof, be they asking kids for their age, or asking them to upload some sort of a document, or asking them to take a selfie of their face. Whatever the methodology is, and it depends on which company we're talking about, it's clearly not really working, and the kids are getting around it.
Yeah, and clearly the kids are outsmarting the ban. Does the government have any plans, any ideas on how to better enforce it?
Well, yeah, the obvious one is lift the fines on big tech, and they're lifting them up to close to 100 million Australian dollars for infringements. They've got 5 major social media companies under investigation at the moment. They've also changed the legislation with this increased fine. They're giving our e-safety commissioner, who's really quite a high-profile person, Julie Inman-Grant. She's an American-Australian who's been at the forefront of this now for nearly a decade. They're giving her more powers to call social media to account and say, you must show me what methodology you're using to keep young people out. So the Australian government is trying. As I say, it feels like it's a real passion of the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, here. He seems to be pushing this really hard. Don't know whether he thinks it's a vote winner. I suppose the Australian general population is getting older, and probably the support for this ban is considerable. I mean, it's just like probably any other place in the world. You catch the buses or head down to the shops, and the young people are on their phones. Whether they're using social media, you can't always know, but it sounds like it from some of the small studies we've seen in the last 7 months that they probably are.
Yeah, that this ban, before it came into effect, was criticized for targeting all children, reducing access to information, important communications platforms for young people, rather than forcing the social media companies to take action to prevent harm. It doesn't really look like they're playing ball, or at least not enough. Those voices, they must be growing louder now that the ban is not really working.
Well, I think it really depends. It sounds funny to break it down like this, but it depends on the family structure, the teaching or school structure that we're talking about in each and every case. I mean, I know friends and family that show their kids a lot of great YouTube educational videos. They have to do all the logging in now. They have to do, maybe their kid is really psyched about astronomy or something. Well, they've got to get their profile up, show the kids how to use it, and show them and monitor the videos that they're using and showing their kids. People are just getting by with this ban, Nicole, really. And I suppose that other countries that want to bring in this ban in the future will also realise this, that from family to family, school to school, ways are being found to do the good things that social media provides in a fair, open way, inside a family or inside a school. But I don't think that anyone's too surprised by these results about young people getting around the system. Everyone knows how keen young kids are to get online, and social media forms part of that. So I don't think there's too much outrage, more like a shrug and muted sort of acceptance that this is what we've made for ourselves.
Yeah. Looking back at the past 7 months, then, do you think this ban can survive, or is it doomed to fail?
I think it will survive. Yeah, I think the political will is really strong to do so. We've got the structure in place with the e-safety commissioner and increased powers going towards her. I think it definitely will stay in place. And I think Australia's quite proud of the fact that it's led the world on this, ahead of places across Europe. And they want to be seen to keep on going with this. I can't see it disappearing. Whether you can say it's a major success story, well, no, I don't think you can on the current stats. I don't think it's going to lose the Prime Minister any votes to keep on pursuing it. So I think they'll keep going with this path.
Journalist Andrew Leslie in Tasmania, Australia. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And to get the details on Ursula von der Leyen's plans for the EU, let's bring in our correspondent, Teri Schultz. She joins us from Brussels. Teri, this clearly isn't working in Australia. Why is Ursula von der Leyen so keen on having her own social media ban?
Well, Nicole, so far we don't know exactly what Ursula von der Leyen will propose. We'll really hear more about this next week. But we do know that her personal opinion is that social media has far too much access to children. She's given speeches where she talked about this, where she, talked about the problems that we've seen in youth, sleep deprivation, bullying, even suicide. And von der Leyen has made it very clear that she feels there should be more weight put on the platforms, on the responsibility of the producers of this material. And if that requires banning children from using that, she seems to be all for it. And she set up an expert group to look at this, a group comprised of teens, for one thing, led by 2 academics. There are parent advocate groups there. And she's asked them to analyze what the benefits are of delaying social media access for children, for teenagers. And she will present the results of this next Monday.
Yep. What do we know about her plans then so far? This expert group is presenting their report, as you said, on Monday.
We don't know what's going to be in her recommendations, and that's because she doesn't plan to come out with this her own plan until September. So what she'll do on Monday is present the findings of this group and what they believe should be done. And it's not exactly clear whether they think that these bans work. As you mentioned, in Australia, the ban of under 16 has clearly shown not to be applied. It's too easy to get around the bans. And we should remember that the EU already has a ban under the Digital Services Act for under 13s, and that too is not being respected. So we really don't know how she will adjust what the recommendations are from this group to then propose new legislation come September.
Yeah, it does look like she's aiming for a fairly top-down approach. How will von der Leyen try to convince the skeptics among the EU members?
Yeah, by bringing it out as a commission-level legislative proposal, it is kind of top-down. And there have been some criticism of that. Some member states would like her to lay out what the problem is and then look for a more collaborative way of dealing with it, perhaps even a country-by-country approach. But on the other hand, there are plenty of EU member states that are already going forward with their own bans, regardless of what the EU does at that level. And France is one of them. Germany is looking at it. Greece has already passed legislation banning under 16s that will go into effect in January. So you really have a wide range of views. And from what I know, that more countries are leaning toward being more restrictive than saying that things should be left as they are, Nicole.
But many experts and the more tech-savvy governments in the EU oppose a blanket ban, and they call for a more nuanced approach. Why doesn't that seem to be an option for von der Leyen?
Again, we don't know what she's going to propose in September, but she has spoken out in favor of a rather restrictive policy. And some of these countries believe that, of course, they can decide for themselves what's best for their own teens. Some are advocating a platform-by-platform approach, meaning that there wouldn't be a ban for teens not to be able to use every platform. But again, it is fair to say that what has been in place now in Australia, the under 13 ban in the European Union, has not been well applied. So perhaps part of her legislative approach will be how to force better compliance for whatever they decide should be the new policy going forward.
Yeah, what can you tell us about ongoing efforts to regulate social media giants and the content they platform?
Yeah, that's also a mixed bag, but the EU is very ambitious about this. Even just today, Nicole, they announced that Meta with Facebook and Instagram are not applying the rules as they should be. They gave them a warning that they need to change their design. You know, this term that has come up, addictive design. The Commission said today that Meta is not doing enough to limit the effects of addictive design, to not target teens and to not get them addicted with, this automatic scrolling and things like that. And that's something that TikTok has already been warned about back in February. So they are clearly trying to really put some force behind the rules that are already in place.
Mm-hmm. Whatever comes out of this expert commission and what the commission decides to swing towards, when could all of this come into effect?
we're a long way from that, because this proposal, this legislative proposal, however they develop it over the summer, will only be introduced in September. And then it takes a very long time to come up with what would look like the final proposal. Then you have to get the European Parliament on board. You have to get the heads of all the governments via the Council of the European Union on board. So I can't imagine that's coming anytime soon. And there's sure to be a lot of heated debate about the best way forward is between now and then.
There's Teri Schultz in Brussels. Always great having your insights. Thanks so much.